all for attending. This is the North American Knowledge Team meeting on Sunday afternoon. It is a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And I thank you all for being here and allowing us to make these presentations, because what we're trying to do is bring together the science and the soul of man for peace. And that is a big sentence. And as you can see from all the medallions here, that KFTV is progressing around the world, and albeit slowly, but there will be a sudden shift. And that's what we want to discuss today. So I hope you enjoy the ride. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute on Plasma Science. The subject index is the basic insights. Today's topic is Anaclism. I'm Alexander, I'm from Canada. It is March 13th, the year 2022. This is a presentation of the Keshe Foundation, North America, Plasma Education Series. We have new people here, we have mature people here, and what we have is a culmination, or shall we say a filtering of well over 3,000 hours of teaching. And so what we've tried to do is to bring it forward in such a manner that everyone can learn at their own pace. And we've tried to break it down into basic, intermediate, and advanced classes. So this is now part of the basic insight, which is a continuation of the basic teaching, basic understanding, and basic knowing. But this is basic teaching as I have done and what I've tried to do on behalf of the Keshe Foundation, so that we can pass this knowledge on as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. And each of us has their own way of doing it. And this is the challenge. As the millions and knowledge seekers that we have around the world, it still represents a very small fraction. And I can't really say what number it is, but we're guessing that it's maybe only around 5%, which means that we have 95% to go. And as such, even energy-wise, we're only taking 80% of the energy from the universe, so we're still supplementing with 20% from this planet. And how is that going to change? And when is it going to change? And so the subject today is Anaclism. And the literal translation of Anaclism is a sudden uplifting. So we are on the countdown. We are planning a launch to the moon on June the 6th, 2022. And so it's T-minus 84 days and counting. And for many of us, we've been on this road for many decades. And for another group of us, we've been on this road for many millennia. And each one is on its own path. But the thing is that we all have a collective goal, and we wonder where does this goal stem from. So one of the things that we've had to learn is a common language. And so, as was brought up earlier on today, we have terminologies and references from all corners of the world. And they all basically are trying to achieve the same thing, and that is to convey a knowledge which starts with the universal order of creation. And so this was outlined in book number 1, and we'll see on the cover of book number 1, the creation of matters. And then we have book number 3, which is the origin of the universe. And somewhere between the two books, there's a connection. We call that the structure of light, which is book number 2. And so the structure of light connects the two, and we really don't know, is like, are we forwards or are we backwards? And at least on this planet, we're right side up. But when we get out into outer space, maybe we'll be upside down. But what we don't know is what we don't know. We only know what we do know. And that totally makes sense, doesn't it? There's a source. We don't know where it is, but we know there has to be a source because we're here. And who are we? And so we have a soul. That's who we are. And what's our connection? Well, that's the link. And just because we can't see that connection, we say, well, that connection has vanished. It's gone. And when we look at our perfect little tiny universe, that little red dot in the bottom right-hand corner, and when we look at the vastness of the rest of the universe, and we say, that relationship is not 80-20%. That relationship is not 95-5%. That relationship is like a drop in the drop in the drop of a drop in the ocean. And so as we learn more, we find that there are certainly uncharted skies as far as we're concerned. And so many of us like to follow a lot of things, but who does the leader follow? And all of us are students. Well, when does the teacher learn? And so the teacher also has to follow a leader. So in fact, the teacher also has to be a student. And we have to do this simultaneously. So the best way really is to follow the moral leader. Because if you can't hear me, or you only believe what you see, then you have a great danger that you could fall off the edge of the flat earth. So we have a lot of things to sort out, and it's going to take a lot of time. And how much time, and at what rate? And so we found that we can get elevated. And what that elevation does is it allows us to move forward at a faster rate. But there are things that slow us down. And this is where we might hit some rough seas ahead. So what we have to learn is how to tune in to the energy of the universe. Because the energy of the universe created us, and the energy of the universe is within us. And so that is what we have to turn on to. But in order to turn on to that, we have to drop out of our limitations. And so we find that we do have different energy levels. And if we can learn how to drop out of one and get into another and understand how to move around, and then we can progress. But see, these are all skills that we have to learn. So what we've accumulated to this point in time is a general understanding of what principal matter is, because let's face it, the principal matter is the matter that's principal in all of us. And so that energy that we have within us comes from somewhere. In fact, it comes from everywhere. And so that energy is a magnetical energy that we call PM ticks. And these PM ticks are traveling everywhere. They're energy packs. And because they travel everywhere, they're diverging everywhere. But these energies have to get together into a force field. And so in terms of coming together, they literally have to dilute. And when they dilute, they go through this plasma convergence. And this plasma convergence is the combination of the plasma gen, which is the pre-plasma, into the post-plasma. And so there is a convergence. And this pre-plasma, which we call plasma gen, is the combination of the antimatter, dark matter, and plasma matter, which we refer to as the principal matter, the transition matter, and the convergence matter. And in order to do that, it does this gravitationally. So this energy that comes magnetically converges gravitationally, and it converges in a field that is common. And in that field, it interacts with that environment. This is what we call the field interaction or inertia. So this is the basic knowledge. And from that basic knowledge, we gathered a basic understanding where we had in physical science, we need verification and validation of our point of existence. In the plasma science, we call that transmission, transition, and transmutation. And when we achieve that, which is what we call a balance, and when we have a balance, that is a maggraph, balance between magnetical and gravitational. And when we have this balance is invisible. And so this balance is gone. So how do we maintain this point of confirmation? So this point of confirmation is only what we can see and touch and feel. And these put a lot of limitations on our souls. And these limitations are compounded by the fact that when we go from our basic 2 dimensions, which is the length and the width, and we go into the 3rd dimension, which starts to get into the curvature of the universe, things don't quite balance out. We keep missing a part of the pie. And so we call that pie. And I call it a pie in the sky because it's a fudge factor. It's what we kind of have to throw in the equation to kind of make the equation balance. And so mathematically, we understand about the x-axis and how we transmit energy through rotation. And we understand the y-axis, how we transmit energy through transition through the poles. And we do understand that we have emotions. And from those emotions, we can create things. And from those creations, we can co-create things. And we can go through various geometries. And these are what we call the soul dimensions. And how we go through these various dimensions requires skill. And we have to be very accurate with this skill, which is one of the reasons we've had to take so long to do this, because all of us have the inherent capability, but we don't have the practiced skill. And so that's what we have to do. We have to have some target practice. And to see how difficult this is, you see that not only when we get into the basic linear world, which has to do with the radius of a circle, but into the circular world, which includes the circle, but that's only 2 dimensions. We have to get into the 3rd dimension, the sphere. And we find that there is a common link. Pi is an integral part of whether we go from 2 dimensions or to 3 dimensions. And in fact, it becomes a limiting factor in us going into, say, 4th dimensions. But it's only a limiting factor of understanding because, you see, we are none of those 3 dimensions. You can't be part of the show and also be in the audience. So the show is in the 3 dimensions, and in the 4th dimension, we would be in the audience. And so when we're looking at this show, scientifically speaking, there is a conservation of energy. And why did we discuss this conservation of energy? You see, because there's some energy that we just don't see. And we know that because when we bring two magnets together, and sometimes we can't bring them very close together because there's this invisible force in between, which we can't see. And so scientifically speaking, the conservation of energy is actually the conservation of magnetic fields. And what do these magnetic fields represent? And so science has a limitation in understanding the balance because science has not accepted the two-way street, which we call a Magravs balancing system involving magnetical and gravitational magnetical forces. And so we try and explain these spiritually. And when we say try and explain it spiritually, and how does it relate to us physically? And so we find that the spirit is the motor of the soul. And the spirit is non-visible, and the soul is non-visible. And so how do we bring these two sciences together? So we have been using the plasma science to add to the knowledge. But the question now is, at what rate of change? At what rate of change? Because there is no prescribed rate, but there is something that drives the rate. And so in the natural plasma terminology, the direction of flow and the strength of flow of this energy is not only dependent on the gradient charge, but also on the charge gradient. So the steeper the gradient, the faster the flow. So the fastness of the flow is different from the strength of the flow. The strength of the field is determined by the strength of the flow. And the strength of the field is the z-axis. And as this field is a transmutation of the x and y axis combination. And so when these three axes come together, they create a plasma. And that plasma is a gravitational force field that comes together in the core, and from that point determines a positioning. Determines a positioning with what? And that is another plasma. And so the plasma has a core position. Another plasma has a core position. And the interaction of these two plasmas create a dynamic plasma in between. And so all of this is really a representation of energy in motion. So energy is always positive. And so when we talk about a charge, we're talking about the direction and strength of flow. And so the reflection of this strength of flow is the synergy and the susceptibility as per relationship references. And so we know that within our range, and say, for instance, the range on this planet, because for most of us, that's all we know that there are visible and invisible forces. And we know that we can interact with these forces. And we know that the invisible forces are stronger. And we know that we can transcend between these forces. So we can transcend these various ranges within a range And within this range, there are various dimensions. We can go to other ranges. And how do we know that? Well, first of all, we have taken physicality and created a Gans. And then with that Gans, we've created a whole. And when you look inside and say, well, the Gans is gone. And where did it go? So because of susceptibility, everything is something. Nothing is nothing. So if this energy was here and now it's gone, where did it go? And so this is the directive of the soul. And is there a soul in this whole? Or is the soul somewhere else? So now we see that there is more to know, because the basic rule in the plasma science is the higher strength field feeds the weaker strength field. Okay, so, but that's one direction. We have transmission, transition, and transmutation. So from the creation of the universe, we ask, how is it created? It exists from energy. And as we say, the combination of these fields come together into a maggrav condition, as we see represented on the cover of book number 1. But what we have to understand that if the energy is following this basic rule, then the question is, how is the energy going from the stronger field to the weaker field? And then where does it go? And so it has to change dimension, because the energy is always in motion. So the relative comparison of the weak field to the strong field in the other dimension is that one is stronger and one is weaker, and that's what indicates the flow. And from there, there is again a two-way street, so it's easy for the stronger to feed the weaker. But then again, where does that go? And if that is so weak, where does it get its energy from to be able to feed back? And so we see the connection not only to the creation of the universe, but to the connection with the universe. And so what we're talking about is a plasma feeding system and a plasma feedback system. And so whether this feeding system is in plasma or whether this feeding system is in the physical plasma, the feeding is the same. But in order to understand the environment that we're in, there has to be a feedback. Regardless of which dimension we are, there has to be a feedback to confirm that dimension. So there's a feeding and a feedback. But there is no confirmation that is visible or tangible. So this is quite the conundrum. We have a physical and a non-physical plasma, and we have a physical and a non-physical connection. And so the only way that we can connect this is to understand that at some point in time, energy disappears and it goes through this vanishing point. But the energy exists and is always there and is always in motion. And so we can't stop it, but energy is flowing. And when these energies come together, there may be a point of conflict. And so energies can come together or energies can conflict. And so that depends on the direction of flow, the field strength, and common denominators. And so all this may sound very, very complex the way I've said it now. But when you're given almost 35 seconds to explain it to someone new, just tell them. The plasma science has to do with magnetical energies of attraction and repulsion. There you have it. But if you really want to understand, you have to understand it's a two-way street. There's a giving and there's a taking. However, there's a giving and a taking from a point. And that point is the magrav, which is a combination of the attraction repulsion forces. So from that magrav can be a giving. We call that emission. From that magrav can be an attraction. We call that gravitational. That attraction can be absorbed. And when it becomes absorbed, then the field strength increases. When the field increases, at some point in time, it also has to release energy. So in the basic model of nuclear decay of the neutron, we see that a neutron can break up into an electron-proton combination. And we found mathematically that something was always missing on the periodic table of elements. And that is the plasma energy. And that plasma energy also includes the release of the PM ticks. So the PM ticks are part of the decay process. So the decay process is kind of an unfortunate thing, you see, because we can go from a plasma state to a physical state, and we can go from a physical state to a plasma state. So which one is the decay and which one is the creation? And how do we keep this together? And because we're having trouble understanding mathematically, and we always have to fudge things, then this bond that is keeping everything together has been one of the anomalies of the regular science. And so that becomes another fudge factor, the bonding fudge factor. So clear the screen and look at the basics and see that if everything is a plasma, then there is an interaction between the neutron and the electron. There is an interaction between the neutron and the proton. There is an interaction in the giving, there's an interaction in the taking. And so this is where the bond comes in, because the giving is unconditional and the taking is conditional on the feedback. So when there is a feedback, that creates a bond. Well, in other words, we have a bond between the neutron and the electron-proton combination on the creation side. And we have a bond on the neutron and the electron-proton combination on the decay side. And we have a bond between the creation and the decay. And so this is how we see things working in the universe. And so we apply this, and we applied it in the cups of life. And it was urgent to release this 2 years ago because of the pandemic. But these are not called the cups of the pandemic. They're called the cups of life, because frankly, it's just as urgent today, if not more urgent today, to understand that cup number one, where we take a physical zinc and a physical copper and a physical nano-coated copper coil. And in that, we create a magnetical and a gravitational field relationship. And so when we take this one cup and we put it with the second cup, and we create an emotional, physical relationship. So one cup is emotional, one cup is physical. And if we need these two to be stronger in the one particular field, then when you're making these ganses, keep the batches at least 1 meter apart so that you can have an emotional gans and you can have a physical gans. And you know that each of these cups are producing within, they're producing a zinc gans, a copper gans, a carbon dioxide gans, a calcium gans, an amino acid gans, and a water gans. And they're providing a place for the soul. And that each cup, therefore, has the 3 basic components: a magnetical force field, a gravitational force field, and a soul force field. And collectively, when we looked at the 5-cup stacker unit, we have the cup of the soul, the cup of the emotion, the cup of the physicality. That's our cup. And then we have the cup of the earth and the combination, the cup of inertia. That's our environment's cup. We put them all together. Collectively, we have the magnetical field, the gravitational field, and the soul field. And this is exactly how we have cellular division, multiplication through division. And so the energy is released in the process of creation, and the energy is released in the process of decay. And this is another fudge factor, the PM6 fudge factor. And we call it radar love because we can't hold it, we can't touch it, we can't see it, but we sure can feel it. Because when 2 forces come together, we find that there's a convergence, and that this is what we call a harvesting of energy that is done universally. And in that process, we achieve a self-enhancement. So that was the essence of creation. So why would we continue to occupy ourselves with self-consumption? And self-consumption is the process of loosh harvesting. Loosh harvesting is the stealing of energy from others. And when we say others, we now know that we have to include both the vertical people and the horizontal people. And so the vertical being the plant life, the horizontal being the animal life. And we as humans have both characteristics. We walk vertically and we sleep horizontally. So maybe that's why we're so confused. And when we look at our tiny little perfect world and compare it to the rest of the world, we see that the rest of the universe is quite large and quite different from the way our world is operating. And we see that there is a principal universal line, magnetic field zone, which is the gravitational component of the universal force fields. And from there, the energy travels. And when we find that if we were to take these force fields and kind of flatten them out, we discovered in a previous session that we can create a shimmering. This is the kind of shimmering that you see on a hot summer's day when you're looking down a road, an asphalt road as you're driving. and it's long and straight and hot, and you see the shimmering of the asphalt, and you know the asphalt is not shiny, but when you look in the distance, you see it very shiny. And so the reason it is shiny is because the energy has to go out and then it has to come back, right? Because it's a two-way street. And so by flattening out these fields, we find that we can create this shimmering effect. And we can find that we can do a lot of things when we have this flat field. So where do we see this flatness within our, our common life? So one of the things that's interesting is when you have two fields that come together, if they're on the same dimension and they're going in opposite directions, that becomes the point of conflict. So that point of conflict can be some kind of physical conflict, or even just a conflict of interest, which is not physical, but it does have physical consequences. And so we know when these two forces come together and they are coming on the same dimension, the energy has to go somewhere. So there's a deflection onto another dimension. So here we have a rotating field that is experiencing conflict, and it is exhausting that energy through a second dimension. So we have a splashing. And so if we review one of the previous seminars, and we review the fundamental principle of the twinity as we see represented in the electron-proton combination, we find that the speed of rotation is a factor. The speed of rotation of the plasma of the electron is dictated by the amount of the magnetic fields which are transferred from the large twin plasma of the proton to the plasma of the smaller twin plasma of the electron. So the electron and the proton are in fact twins, but they are of different sizes. And it is the difference of the sizing that determines the direction of flow. So in the plasma, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And the electron rotates. And so we find that the speed of the rotation is dictated. And, if you take the combination of the speed of rotation and the flatness of the field, a very interesting thing happens. And so many of us have gone to the beach and we wonder, how can we get to the other side? And if the other side is too far for us to throw, maybe we can kind of skip along the surface of the water. And so what I'm referencing is stone skipping. And in order to have a better stone, the flatness of the stone is important. And the smoothness of the stone is important. And then the skill of the person throwing the stone is important, so that you can impart a spin on that stone. And not so that it flips end over end, but so that it rotates in one plane. And as it rotates, you can throw that stone, and that stone is more dense than the water. And that stone is more dense than the air. And that the water is more dense than the air. Am I stating the obvious? Well, except that the stone, as you throw it in the air, is obviously going to come back down to the water. But because of the rotation and because of the flatness, it will skip. And when it skips, suddenly it has to go up again. So the dense stone not only rises above the water, but rises through the air again. And you say, well, wait a second, is that anti-gravity? And then it comes down again. Okay, so what goes up must come down. So it comes down and skips again. And this is pretty cool. And then it skips again. And if you're really, really good at this, which requires some practice, some target practice, you may be able to get to the other side. And that other side would be farther than what you could normally throw it at. And so the thing is that if you don't get to the other side, at some point in time, the speed of the rotation diminishes. And the density of the stone takes over, where not only can it no longer skip up into the air, but it sinks in the water and disappears. So the energy of the rotation is gone. The energy of the skipping is gone. And the stone disappears in the water. But what remains is the form artifact of the skipping stone, because you see the waves in the water. And I also want you to notice that in the center of the wave is where the stone hit. And that stone is precisely in the middle of the bullseye. So the stone has mastered the target practice. It always hits the bullseye from that point. And so this allows us to understand how we can connect things, and we see the effects of gravity and the effects of gradients. And so one of the ways that we can connect two bodies of water together is to terrace them. But we can also create a bridge in between two bodies of water that are at the same height. And so we create a water bridge. But you see, nothing happens, right? Nothing happens because there's no flow. It's in total balance. However, now when we start to impart a flow, namely a direction of flow and then a strength of the flow, we find that the water will move. So it will come in on one side and go out on the other side. And everything in between is a connection. How many connections are in between? Theoretically, you could make this connection go all the way around the world. So if you could physically make this connection of daisy chains all around the world, and you can do this physically, and then you can do this using water, well, now you understand why the air goes all the way around the world. So the air has already done that. So when you look at one stone, what you have to see is that there are physical forces which are pulling this stone back to Earth, which we call these flux lines. And these flux lines follow the surface of the Earth. And it's why the air goes around the Earth, because it follows these flux lines. It's also why satellites orbit the Earth. They follow the flux lines. But if you get a group of us and each of us lifts a stone, we find that these flux lines will disfigure. So sometimes these flux lines will be higher and sometimes they will be lower. So in between the stones, they will be lower. And so if we are able to take a stone and put a rotation on it and throw it with enough energy, and so that it would just hit the high points, then the distance it would travel would be shorter, because it wouldn't have to go from the high points to the low points. It would just hit the high points and skip along. And so this is what happens when you're doing stone skipping. But see, these stones aren't skipping. These stones are just dead weight that we lifted. And when we release them, they'll come back to the earth. And so they create a frequency. And so this is how we see a point of conflict when these energies come together. And the only way that these energies can be dissipated is they have to go somewhere. And this is the question, where do they go? So they have to go into another dimension. Now, if they don't go into another dimension, then that becomes a choice of self-consumption. But we can also convert that energy and stay in the same dimension. Or we can also change the dimension and enhance. So we have different choices with respect to our conflict resolution. And so in order to understand how this conflict resolution is occurring, we have to understand that there is a transmutation of energy. So one of the transmutations of energy is to increase the mass. So that is the gravitational taking. Another way to transmute the conflict resolution is to increase creation, which is the giving of the magnetical force. And the third way is just to maintain a balance. So really, when we have this balance, we could say that nothing is happening. But the truth of the matter is the energy is always moving. So if we are skipping along, or we're just dropping rain, you find that the raindrops always fall in the center of the circle. The target shooting is absolutely precise. And so if we look at the energy transmission, it is not equal all the way along. In fact, right at the point where the raindrop comes in, or where the stone hits the surface of the water, the strength of the energy is the highest. So as it goes, as it skips along, the energy gets less and less and less and less, to the point where the stone can no longer skip and it falls in the water. Where does that energy go? Well, we say the energy was transferred to the water and it created the waves. But you know, the stone was skipping and the stone was sinking, and someone threw the stone and all of that energy has disappeared. And so we just don't know where it went. And this is the same thing when we were playing the musical chairs last week. When we find that that energy keeps coming and it keeps gravitating, and we can't throw people away, we have to keep pushing them towards the center. And so each circle represents a field, and each circle gets smaller and smaller, and the energy keeps coming. So we find that there's a lot of pressure, and that pressure comes into the center. which is the exact opposite of what happens with the stone and the raindrop. And as more and more keeps coming, and we can't stop it because energy is always in motion, what happens at that center point? So you find where the energy is coming in, it starts to gather energy. And in fact, now, as it gets towards the center, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And somehow that energy has to go out. And where does it go? So we're going to have to get rid of some things. And so we have to determine, is it what we need or is it garbage? And so we'd like to throw the garbage away. Where exactly on the map is away? And which map are you looking at? And where does it go? And where does it come from? Because you keep getting more garbage, don't you? And if this garbage attraction and this garbage throwing is sudden, and if you can't deal with it, then it becomes destructive. And if this destruction is sudden, what we call an explosion, then that we call a cataclysmic reaction, because a sudden destructive force is cataclysmic. And what we're going to talk about today is the opposite, because we can create a disappearance of energy without destruction. So in other words, when these forces come together, they deflect, they recombine, they transmutate, and they disappear, totally vanish. And so now we understand that there is a physical plasma and there's a plasmatic plasma. And we call them both matter. So to differentiate, we call the small m matter state physical and the capital M matter state plasmatic. We can also call it matter gen. So there is some kind of common denominator between these states, because we can go from one to the other. And so we can do this through either the binding or the flowing of energy. So if we're just binding energy, then that energy is just gravitational. But if we're flowing that energy, then it also is magnetical. So if we give and take from ourselves, so like the dog chasing his tail, that's the comedy of our limited knowledge. But the advanced knowledge is showing that the energy can be binding or it can be flowing. And so there's a principal interaction, because energy is always in motion. You create a binding force where you create that mag-grav condition, but you create a flowing force between two plasmas, each of which is a mag-grav, and the combination of which is also a mag-grav. So this is the basis of principal interactions. And we've only looked at two plasmas here. But in the universe, energy packs are traveling all over the place. And each of them has a different composition, a different gradient. And it is this combination of what I call aminogen forces coming together is what creates the spice of life. And we know that the life is very spicy because there's over 7 billion of us and each of us is different. But each of us is a plasma and each of us is made the same way. And so we have a dream energy, we have a spirit energy, and we have a soul. And so we also have a uniqueness. So we see that as water can give energy, water also takes energy. And so you cannot give and take from the stronger to the weaker and stay in the same dimension. You have to change that dimension. And the crossover point between those two dimensions is the vanishing point. And if you go into the third dimension, well, you crossed over. You crossed over from the point of verification and validation, which you're coming to via transmission, but going from a point of transition. And when you confirm your point of existence, that would be your transmutation. But if your transmutation is gone into your soul, then you're starting to play with different realities. And that is the confirmation of the different realities, namely the physical reality and the plasma reality. And so we have to define these, because we can see that somehow we have to come from here to there and do it very accurately, because energies will deflect. But how do you hit that bullseye? So one of the ways that we do this physically is we set goals, we keep score, or we pass judgment. But another way is to wake up. And what do you mean by waking up? So we see that the stacker cups, when they come together, are really a representation of the energy flow in our physical destination state. And when we look at the energy flow in the universal cup, is the energy flow in the dynamic transfer state. And so the target practice really amounts to a relationship between the universal cup and the stacker cup. This is a representation of a feeding and a feedback system. In other words, a plasma feeding and a physical feedback. It could also be a plasma feeding and a plasma feedback. We have been using a physical feeding and a physical feedback system almost exclusively. So of the three possible systems that we've been using, we have been using the lowest system. So we need to practice to go from the dynamic transfer state to the physical destination state. And we need to do this in two ways. So now we understand that whichever way we use is a manifestation. So our perception of the stacker and our perception of the universal reality is the same insofar as two fields come together to form another. So the formation of any field is this manifestation. And fundamentally, the plasma feeding is what leads to this manifestation. So now we have the opportunity to see a non-tangible or a tangible manifestation. It could be non-visible or visible, and therefore it could be plasmatic or physical. And in fact, it can be dark matter or light matter. But if it isn't light matter, is it dark matter? And if it isn't dark matter, is it light matter? And so this is what we will discuss more in the future, because there is a plasmatic reality and a physical reality. So if we understand that the physical reality depends on the plasma reality, then either manifestation is a form artifact of that. And if it's a form artifact of that reality, then we can see that the emotion of presence is also a form artifact of what? And we're back to energy in motion. And so we came to the conclusion that when we looked at how we have a MAGRAV feeding conversion. So in other words, when we have energy coming in, it's being attracted gravitationally. And in that process, we absorb that energy. So the energy is coming in and more energy is coming in. And it keeps coming and coming and coming. And as we've seen with the musical chairs, at some point it comes to the middle and then it has to go somewhere. So we know in order to maintain a MAGRAV, that energy has to go out and more energy has to go out. So this going out is done magnetically through repulsion. And in that process, this energy is emitted. And so the determination of whether we do this magnetically or gravitationally is what we call susceptibility. So this becomes part of what we call the plasma feeding system. So when we look at the core of the plasma, which contains the neutron, and to go from inside the core to outside the core, this is a magnetical feeding. And in order to maintain this feeding, there has to be a gravitational feedback. And so what we're seeing with this outside feeding is the decaying process of the neutron into an electron-proton combination. So the inside being the neutron and the outside being the electron-proton combination. And so that is on the outside of the containment. The containment is the MAGRAV condition, but the outside is outside of the containment. And many of us would refer to this as the aura. And we have more than one aura. And the reason for that is because we have more than one soul. And so we haven't determined which aura this one is, but there is an aura. And then from that point, there's a containment. And that containment is a MAGRAV. And that containment has an inside and an outside. And that outside goes all the way around. And so we find that the original containment of the neutron within the plasma creates a field around, which is a magnetical field. And this is the basis of the feeding and the feedback system to maintain the plasma. But once it goes outside, there is another feeding. And this feeding is unconditional. And that feeding goes unconditionally, likewise, in all different directions. And that feeding has an aura. And there are magnetical field forces on that aura. And so we see multiplication through division. And they are all the same. So we have a basic plasma with an aura. On that aura, we have a basic plasma. From that, we create another aura. Each one is feeding. On the path to continue, because it has to continue, it has to gather energy. Where does that energy come from? And how does it make it all the way around? There's no skipping. There's no stone skipping. There's nobody throwing it. There's no one giving that energy, it is just coming from the universe. So what we're looking at is at the feeding. What we're not seeing is the feedback, but we know it's there, because in order to maintain the balance of the Magrath condition in the plasmatic condition, there has to be a relationship between the feeding and the feedback. And failing to understand this puts a limitation on our soul. And so we dwell on the past and we dream of the future, and it affects our emotion. And it affects our emotion today, because that's the only emotion that we have today, is the emotion of presence. And so the emotion of presence is the transformation of the energy between the soul of man and the soul of the body. And this transformation interacts with the sun and the earth in what we call inertia. And you got here with an unconditional trust. And somewhere along the way, we've lost that, first of all, trust, and second of all, the unconditionality. And this has put a limitation on our souls. So we want to go, but we are anchored. And so we have to understand that our point of view needs to be from our point of view. And that is, our soul is the gravitational plasma point, and it is dynamic. And the earth is the gravitational point with respect to the earth. It is magnetical with respect to us. So our point of view is from our point of view. The earth's point of view is from the earth's point of view. You have to determine which is which. And so that is the physical reality. But there is an emotional state, and there's a physical state, and there's a soul state. And so we have an ability to transform from our soul state into our physical transportation vehicle, which is operating on this planet. And so this is what we're always asking, we want to get back to nature. Well, what is nature? Nature is what is normal. And normal is what the majority is. And the majority is always seeking freedom and emancipation. And the universe is normal. And the earth is part of the universe. So the earth seeks freedom and emancipation. So we, in fact, seek what the universe has and what the earth wants. And so this is how we now get this soul sequencing interaction. That is, the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth attracts the soul of the man. And it does this very accurately. It's done a lot of target practice. And then the soul of the earth can now interact with the soul of the man. And this attracts the soul of the body. This is our spiritual attachment. And now the soul of the earth and the soul of the body can manifest the physicality of the body. And that is one way to do things. But we have other ways to do things now. And so the primary thing that we have to do is the Vision Enhancement Unit is a gift to the US military to facilitate PTSD recovery, because we have to soothe the pain. that is inflicted on us physically, but the pain is in our spirit and in our soul. And so this vision enhancement unit facilitates the plasmagen interaction. And that is our gift. And so this gift is extending to everybody because everybody needs to understand what the plasma science is. It's transcending the limitations of science. So basically, plasma is a kind of energy state, and it's very important. It's an existential situation for us. So to understand that it's not that it's man-made that's the problem, it's the role of man. You just have to figure out which angle you're looking at. And so we have a vertical angle in the vertical enhancement unit, and we have a horizontal angle in the horizontal enhancement unit. And so this is in addition to the universal body enhancement units. And so, yes, we need to do energy binding, but we need to do this in a self-consuming way and at the expense of others. And if we're witness to this, that is another form of self-consumption, because as witnesses, we become users and abusers. And the only way that we can continue being users and abusers is when morality is the missing ingredient. And when we are missing this missing ingredient, the only way to supplement it is through leash harvesting. And too many of us do this out of necessity, out of environment, out of context, but always out of choice. And you can't have a choice if you're not aware that, first of all, the wrong choice is your eternal burden. So we have to turn our backs on that. We can filter this energy and we see ourselves as victors. When there are victors, there are losers. And so when we say that the morality is the missing ingredient, by being the champions, then we are only the beholders. And the rest, then the rest is what? So what we're looking at is only at what is skin deep. We need to look deeper. We need to see that the basics of our society, the killing, the jealousy, and the kingship, suddenly we are witness to this vanishing point of change. Sudden. Because we live in a feedback condition. And so physically, we have conditional feedback. And it needs to be very effective. And so one of the ways that we can be effective is actually go through genetic mutilation, which we talked about. Or we can go through mental abuse. That's very effective, isn't it? And then always the, the final fallback, the terrorism. But there's another effective feeding, and that is an unconditional feedback. And that comes from the plasma feeding. And do we have a choice? Well, ask yourself, if we remove the conditional feeding, because we're dependent on the conditional feeding, what happens? So we still need this effective feedback, and it still is conditional. But now we've changed the condition. So we have options. The feedback to the feedback, right? We've changed the condition. So now what is the new feedback? You have abused me, you have terrorized me, you killed my father, I will seek revenge. Right? That's one feedback. And what does that feedback do? It propagates the moral abuse. So we can do another feedback, and that is to terminate this so-called effective feedback with another conditional feedback. People sometimes say, well, this conditional feedback is mind control. Well, mind control is part of the original mental abuse feedback. If it is unconditional, it is not mind control. It is an effective, unconditional feedback. This is the plasma feeding. And so now we have a choice. If you remove this conditional feedback, which one would you choose? Would you choose the conditional one, or would you choose the unconditional one? And then the question becomes, because most of us in our right minds would return to the plasma feeding, because we know the penalties associated with the alternatives. Why would most of us want to return to the plasma feeding? Right? Because that is the unconditional universal feeding system. And when we realize that, that's what constitutes freedom and emancipation. And at that point in time, there will be a change. And the rate of change will be sudden, very sudden. In fact, beyond the speed of light, that's how fast it'll happen, because the universe has ethics. These ethics follow a universal ethos, which ends up with creation. How can you have creation without morality, compassion, and courage? All of the above. So we find that as the air goes around and the air is connected, so is the plasma field. And this is why we do the plasma dome, because the peace dome is facilitating our emotional transformation, which is going from our dream state to our man-made state, from our aminogen state into our post-amino state, right? It's going from beyond our dream state into our awakened state. And what does that mean? How is that energy transferred? Whoa, look. Once you set up that bridge of knowing, where did this energy come from? That all these people crossed the bridge. Why are they doing that? Because they have discovered something. They have made the connection. They have seen how the energy crosses over that unseen connection, that vanishing point. And we know that it's there between our physicality and when we go to sleep in our dream state. And now we know that there's beyond our dream state that goes into our soul state. And if it's beyond that, then it goes into the connection to the creator. And we know this by knowing, by connection. And so this invisible thing is what we call outer space, because we are living in an earth space. And when we are within that earth space and we want to go out of that earth space, the only thing that we've been able to do is to go into an inner space, the in-between. And then we see that there is a plasmagen state from where we came from. And we know that we have a physical state is where we've come to. It's this transition from one dimension to another dimension, and this transition between one range and another range. The range of outer space, the range of inner space, the range of earth space. And we have a deficiency, or we have this deficiency is going to be resolved. And so we see that we now have the capability to go beyond this vanishing point, where we not only have the capability to materialize, but we also have the capability to dematerialize. And if we have both of these capabilities, and therefore, from the point of dematerialization, we can come into materialization or rematerialization. Yeah? And we need to do this accurately. And so that's why we need the target practice to understand the difference in our relationships, the new relationship between outer space and inner space, the things that have been missing in science. And now, as we realize that things have changed, the conditions have changed, the conditional controls have been exposed, the lies have been exposed. Are you still going to believe the lies? Are you still going to believe the feedback? Or are you going to believe the feeding? And then from that feeding, are you going to create your own feedback? To understand that the connection is not a direct connection, but a solid connection. Because it doesn't have to be a direct connection. There is a contiguous connection. There's a contiguous connection of the universe. Between the inner space and the outer space. And you know it. So when you look at the Universal Council and its connection, it doesn't say which environment. It's a universal environment. The universal connection of the Universal Council to the universal environment. This is what we're all looking for, the greater oneness. When we come together and understand how we can transcend the various dimensions and the various ranges. And so then we understand that we are the magnetical residue, which is the gravitational magnetical field forces as represented by attraction and repulsion, and manifest themselves in a convergence and divergence of energy, where each of us is an independent variable, and each of us can reach an interdependent variable. So this makes it an interdependent universe. And each one of us can go through this emotional transformation and teach each one of us. And we can do this at a higher energy level, because we can do this beyond the teaching of one person, one time, one nation, one planet, one universe. The teaching is all the same. So we don't need to use the slowest, we can use the fastest. And so we can make this universal connection and understand from our elemental state and our nano state, we see that there's a physical reality to and from. And from our GAN state and our dream state, we see that we can transcend the physical reality to the plasma reality, to and from. But we know that we can have an emotional transformation to our soul state. And this is a plasma reality to a plasma reality and from. And we can do all three where we only had the choice of one. And we'll say this ain't rocket science, which is short for this ain't no rocket science. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute. This is plasma science. And we're calling all Earth patriots, both near and far. We need the World Peace Treaty. We need to sign it with a pen. We need to sign it with our heart. And we need to sign it with our soul. Because this is how we will achieve the physical and emotional transformation. And yes, it will happen suddenly. And it will not be a disaster. It will be a sudden uplifting, a sudden elevation, an anaclism, opposite to cataclysm, which is a sudden disaster, because we are going to be crossing over this point because it's based on the universal moral denominator. And all of us will be gaining the sudden insight into the universal language of freedom. This is why the plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the outer space age. And this is the end of today's lesson. And this actually is the end of the Basic Insight series. Thank you again for allowing me to present. I hope you enjoyed this journey.
Thank you, Alex. Again, another profound teaching. And let's open up the floor. We want to see if anyone has any questions. Maybe before we do that, is there anyone new here? We know Pat was joining us for the first time. Anyone else who'd like to tell us their name and where they're from? If you've been here for the first, if this is your first time here? I think I know what happened on that Dome of Peace. Apparently, you were sharing the screen and I didn't realize that I was looking at a different screen. And so your share came up in back of my foil that I had up, and that's why no one heard anything. So that just explains that to those who are wondering what happened in the background. Are you ready to take? Excuse me?
One of these days we'll get it right.
Yeah, no, I should have looked just to see, but apparently you had to share, but that's no problem at all. Would anyone like to pose a question or bring up something they'd like to discuss with Alex? I have written down a couple questions, but I thought maybe the others would like to bring something up.
Well, I would like to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed, and it cleared many of my questions from Qigong and all that. It was very, very good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Yes, I would say it is very good. Anyone else would like to say anything or bring up a question? I'll start with my first question, Alex. On the flight, on the 6622 flight to the moon, I'm thinking at first I thought the whole unit would go to the moon. As of late, I'm thinking the unit will stay there. There'll be no physicality moving. Even the person inside, you could see them through the window, let's say. But yet it'll be as if the soul is just traveling there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but, and of course, this will confound most observers that aren't knowledge seekers or been around the Keshe Foundation. They'll say this is preposterous. You couldn't have gone to the moon because we were here and nothing moved in the physicality. I'm thinking that you'll go in the plasma energy or soul level. You'll observe the moon, and hopefully it's some sort of test pilot that can say, I definitely went to the moon. And then, of course, there'll be a little bit of controversy because the observers will say, well, yeah, but you didn't go anywhere. How could this be? Do you want to add any of your thoughts to that? You don't have to. It's just something that I was thinking that is probably going to be observed.
Well, Mark, so I don't have the definitive answer to that question because I don't have any access to
Sure.
that part of the advanced knowledge. But
If you were to take an educated guess,
well, the educated guess is this, that when you go to sleep at night, you go into a dream state, you can travel, but your physicality remains in that position. In the new science, the physicality does move. It does move because it is attached. So the key point of the advancement of the science is to make sure that, all the packages stay together. Because the physicality is a package, the dream state's a package, and the soul state is a package. And so all three of these have to work together. The difference is that on the physical state, the spirit and the soul are within the body. And when we do the traveling, the physical state is within the soul of the man. It's just the opposite. And so when I look at the picture, if I can go back to the, see if I can find the picture of the plasma. And I think I did a pretty good job of that. But where were we?
anyone else like to weigh in on that question? While Alex is looking for the picture he's looking for.
Do we see that, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, so this field that is outside of the plasma is the ray creation. But that ray has a motion, and that the basic motion of that particular ray is to follow the feeding to the feedback position. But in order to continue, it has to maintain its Magrat condition. And in order to maintain its Magrat condition, it has to absorb and emit energy. And so the question is where from? Because now it is no longer contained within another field, but it is the containment of the field. Right? So it changes personality. And that personality change is from being inside a gravitational field to having the gravitational field inside it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. From that point, as the energy is coming in, it too has to go somewhere. And so once it gets to that point of convergence in the center of the core, it has to change its dimension and emission and become an emission. That emission also becomes now a magnetical field. So where we had from the where we had from the one, which is now on your magnetical field, and from that magnetical field, it is creating more magnetical fields. Then it starts interacting with other fields. And so what is not shown in this particular picture is these other fields. So you have to understand that these other fields are there and they're always interacting. We don't have the skill set in the field of physicality to keep track. And we know this because you know how complex our physical lives are. And when you compare the complexity of our life to the complexity of our body, which has over 70 trillion cells, and you say, man, I'm having a hard time just, keeping my life on track. How am I going to keep track of 70 trillion little lives? And so these cells in your body are working according to the plasma feeding and the plasma feedback that they are given. And the problem which I have identified today is in the feedback loop. So if this feedback loop has an external modification, then we have to adjust to that. But when that external modification is derived from a point of use and abuse, then you see that the feedback is also contaminated. Take that condition off, and you find what becomes the default. You've had experience with a computer, you've made many changes, and then you've gotten all messed up, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to go back to the default factory setting. And you find in the plasma science, the default factory setting is physical and emotional vitality, right? The reversal of genetic modification, right? The restoration of the basic principles of growth. Why is that the default? Okay, because the universal feedback is of a higher energy level than the physical feedback. And so when you want to connect back to the source of the creation, then you actually connect to the truth. And this is where the game is changing. And this is where people who are not understanding, but they are aware. They are aware that something is wrong. And so what you find is that in all your life, what you're trying to do is to avoid what you don't want. We've now come to a point where, sure, we want to avoid what we don't want, right? So that's the barrier of fields. But where do we want to go? Well, we've never practiced this kind of target shooting. And so now we have a chance that we can travel in the rest of the universe the way it was intended. So I think that we can, because, and let's clarify, thou shalt not kill. Why? Because it violates universal law. All right. So how do you manifest physically into the plasma domain? You have to be contained. And so you are contained within this magnetic field. So the direct answer to your question, based on this line of thinking, is that your physicality has to go with your soul. And as such, wherever you go, you have the option to remanifest, rematerialize physically. And then the question becomes, into what?
So
that's going to depend on the environment, right?
So you're referring to the soul of physicality or the actual physicality?
The soul of physicality becomes your conveyor. The actual physicality is embedded within the soul of physicality. You see, because you as a baby manifest from that energy that was within your soul. All right? It was your soul that caused the manifestation physically of you in babyhood. And then as you graduated to adulthood, you absorbed more and more energy, and you went through a learning process. And that learning process has been, retarded by external improper feedback. So if we eliminate this improper feedback, what would be the feedback? And what would be the feeding? And we find that we automatically default to that. And so we have proven that in our agriculture, right? We have seen phenomenal yields with crops. So the vertical people have benefited. And why do the vertical people benefit so readily? Because there's no resistance, right? They can't run away. They respond to the conditional things. If the conditions are harsh, they will wither and die. And if the conditions are life-giving, then they will respond accordingly. And so we have seen in the plasma science the wonderful manifestation in the physicality of the practice of plasma science. Well, that will extend to us as well, because we are of the same class. And so knowing that now, the question is, what's holding us back? So the methods that we use to enhance the vertical people, we can use to enhance the horizontal people. And we are both vertical and horizontal. So by extension, we qualify in this system. And so are we restricted then just to here? And that becomes the next question. And if we're not restricted to here, then that means we can go somewhere else and manifest somewhere else. Well, I mean, think about it. And I'm just saying, like I say, I don't know for sure, but you think about it. If you're going to manifest physically on Mars, would you be still sleeping on Earth? I'm just asking.
Perhaps. Not sure. Took a while to get that out.
Well, you've got your feet firmly planted in midair, I see.
Here's another question. Thank you for that answer. Anyone else want to add anything? The second question I had was, can we or how can we differentiate between an emotion created by the soul of physicality and an emotion created by the soul of the man? Anyone or Alex want to add to that?
Well,
I always, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's quite easy. It's quite easy. If I know cherry cheesecake is delicious, so you know, if I want one, that would be the emotion of the soul of the man. But if
Soul of physicality, you mean?
No, because I haven't had the cherry cheesecake yet. But if I eat the cherry cheesecake, that
you
tastes
think
good.
the soul is going to manifest cherry cheesecake when it doesn't eat except fields? I mean,
what
I would think
what I'm saying, in order for me to manifest a cherry cheesecake, I would have to have an emotional attachment to it. And because I don't have the cherry cheesecake, and the way I would emotionally manifest this, right, as I would whip right on down to the store and buy one, right? So once I get this cake and once I eat it, then the emotion that I have, which will be, you know, the satisfaction or the tummy ache from eating it, would be the emotion of the soul of physicality.
I think Ed wants to enlighten us about right now.
Can you hear me? My
Yeah.
internet connection has been very bad. I've been coming in and out.
We'll let you know.
But okay, I asked this question once of Mr. Kesh. The only thing I have to contribute here is what he answered me, because I asked him about this difference between the emotion of the physicality and the emotion of the soul. And he said the emotion of love and physicality always has expectation attached to it. The emotion of love of the soul has none. It just gives, and it just knows that if it gives, it will receive, and if not from the one being given to, from somewhere in the universe. But this emotion of the love of the soul just gives with no expectation, and it just knows that it will receive. But the soul of physicality always has an expectation attached to it. And I thought that was really something to hang on to.
So can I say that that's an unconditional feeding then?
The one where you just know that it's going to come from somewhere?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think you just got a great answer there, Mark.
Excellent. Yes. So the same way that water always flows downhill, you're saying the stronger plasma always feeds the weaker plasma. Are there any exceptions? I'm sure we can make water flow uphill by changing the conditions. But in the plasma world, the stronger always feeds the weaker. There aren't any exceptions. I know the weaker confirms to the stronger its existence by feeding back to the stronger. But are there any exceptions, or is that the rule?
I think it's the rule. That's my opinion.
Can I chime in again, Mark?
No, you only get one chime per meeting. No, go ahead.
Thank
Of
you.
course, everybody's welcome to come in.
Well,
Thank you, Ed.
I think that's a valid question because, like you say, the weaker, the flow of giving from the stronger to the weaker, the weaker receives it, but then what it does with it, it transforms it into something that it can be given back to the stronger. And I think that whatever it transforms into is something that the stronger has less of and receives, so that there's a flow both ways. But still, the stronger feeds the weaker is the rule, because what the weaker is feeding back actually has a stronger energy than what of that same strength that the stronger has lack of, perhaps. At least that's the way I have satisfied it within myself, that the flow can go both ways. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think I do, yeah. I know the weaker feeds the stronger to confirm the stronger's existence. And it feeds back to the stronger to confirm its existence. Here's another question about multiple use of products in the store. How do we know if they're for one person to use? Someone asked this question. I know Mr. Kesh isn't here, but I would ask him. How do you know, for example, this marble that he's talking about, do you think that could be shared, or would that just be for one person to use? How do we know what products? And I know the original paint pens were for single use, but the new paint pens using two would be for multiple users. And how does that work, for example, with the ice cap or the slippers or anything like that? Someone apparently had gotten a product, but it didn't say whether it was for one user or it could be shared with multiple users. Any comments from anyone?
So I would like to chime in on that. You know, I can't have Ed being the only two chime in. Anyway, Mark, if you're drawing energy out of a system, then that energy has to go somewhere, and it's obviously to be drawn in, it has to be gravitational. Are we okay with that?
So far, so good.
So if it's a gravitational, that means that energy has been absorbed. So now the susceptibility of that energy is such that if you've removed that energy as an illness from somebody, then it is now of a weaker state, and the person that you remove that from has now more energy, so that energy is of a higher state. So by removing that energy and absorbing it, you will no longer go back. And so that's part of the healing process. Now you enter into another plasma field. So the question then becomes, is that plasma field stronger or weaker? Because if that plasma field becomes weaker, then the energy that's contained is going to be released, isn't it? And that you don't want to do that. So this is where you don't want to share these products.
Do we remove it or do we balance it?
Well, in all cases, you're balancing, right? So you know, you created a condition where you've attracted this energy field, and so the energy motion is the motion towards the balance. So I just don't want you to say the absolute balance. So, you know, because there could still be a gradient, and there would still be a gradient because it's in a plasma state. But what I'm saying is the relationship between two fields, the higher feeds the weaker. So when we see with the cups of life, one feeds and one depletes, right? The emotional one feeds because it's of a higher energy state, and cup number two, the physical one, depletes. And then in the process of depletion, it creates a conversion. And so in that process of conversion, then that becomes a food.
Right, I was more or less thinking of the little marble. Could one family share one marble perhaps? Or, you know, this piece of ceramic that would absorb and feed? Does it get linked to one body and the emotions of one brain? Or
Well,
could it
so
be- we don't know yet. It hasn't been released, but I'm just surmising.
no, but you know, I want to cross the bridge of knowing. Okay, so you can't know the individual things, and I don't claim, you know, to know, but like, let's sort it out. Okay, so here's a couple of things to understand. So for instance, in terms of the feeding, if this is a feeding system, is it just feeding today, or is it, you know, feeding tomorrow as well? And so if it's feeding, then that marble becomes depleted, right? In order to maintain its Maglev condition, then that the universe has to feed it again. So in fact, the personality of that marble becomes that of a catalyst. Okay, does that part make sense?
Or a catalyst would be something that starts a process.
Yeah, but doesn't get consumed. Right, so it's not changing its energy level. It is a facilitator. It is a functionary. It's giving energy out and it's drawing energy in, and as such, it can maintain its personality. But I want to ask you another question, and because I've asked myself this question before with respect to how a mother bird feeds the chicks. And one of the things that I found out, because I don't know much about keeping birds, but I was forced into that situation. And I have you ever seen a bird regurgitate? It actually, you know, it regurgitates a kind of um, pudding, for lack of a better word. Have you ever
No.
seen that?
No, only out of the other end.
Well, when I seen it, I was initially quite disgusted. And as someone who understood birds explained this to me. Oh, that bird likes you. That bird is feeding you. And I said, well, that's a hell of a way for a
Oh,
bird to
okay.
demonstrate how much it likes me. And so this is what birds do. They will, a mother bird will actually eat, let's say eat some seeds and convert it into this pudding and then regurgitate it and deposit it back
Right.
into the mouth of the chicks.
Yep.
So we know that the moment the food enters into the mouth, it gets converted into a gans. And so isn't this what the mother is doing? She's taking, it's no longer a physical food, but it is a gans food. And she's regurgitating that back into the mouth of the chicks. Now, just first of all, I have numerous questions. So one of the questions is, you know, to me, initially, that's kind of a really disgusting practice. And yet for a bird, that's very natural. And second, why do I feel disgusted by that? You know, like where does that feeling stem from? And if I don't know where that feeling stems from, then the question I ask is, how did the bird learn how to do this? And so, oh, well, you know, the bird would have learned to do that from its mother. Well, I guess, but I don't remember, you know, the first couple of years of my life. And I wonder if, you know, the bird remembers the first, you know, few days of its life. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, if you think back to when do you consciously remember? Do you remember your first conscious experience? It was not when you were born. I think my first conscious experience was around the age of 3 or 4. And I'm not sure. All I know is that I had to stand on my tiptoes to look over the kitchen table. So, you know, I know that I was like less than 31 inches tall. So, and I knew that by connection, right? I didn't have a tape measure, didn't know how to use one. But I don't remember before that. And yet, you know, I do remember some of the teachings that my mother gave me. So, you know, this is the difference. When we learn things through our plasma fields, we have a more natural way of doing things. And there's nothing wrong with learning in the physical fields. That's what we're doing today. But, you know, we cannot possibly learn everything. And we cannot go to the library and read every book. And we cannot, although many of us are trying, to listen to all the seminars, going back to, you know, the public teachings and private teachings of the KAKT Foundation, which is over 10 years now. But, you know.
Okay. Kay says in the chat, it's embedded in the RNA, I believe. This
There you go.
feedback, perhaps.
Yeah. So there you go. So what I'm trying to do is to relate to you the question of, if this capsule is a catalyst, that means it doesn't get consumed and it doesn't absorb your energy. It's a giver, right? So therefore, it may be possible to, you know, share this with another person. And going back to the female bird, when she regurgitates, she doesn't just give it to one bird, but she'll give the same thing to all the other chicks. You know, she maybe have 3, 4 chicks in the nest. So she will feed all of them, right? And yet she is the one feeder.
Okay.
And the thing is that she is not consuming herself in that process. She has eaten some food, she's masticated it and turned it into a gas, and then she regurgitates it back, and then she can go eat some more food and do the same process all over again. So I'm going to answer your question by saying the methodology of the female bird would probably be very similar to this type of thing. So I'm gonna pick C. I'm gonna say yes.
Multiple users.
Yes.
Good.
Now, you know, is you know, you can comment on the logic and the example, and I stand to be corrected. But that's my assumption.
Yes, Sean.
Remember, the cups are also made out of ceramic, and we're
Yes.
told they're individual uses.
Yes. Yes, I know the sweet cup and the cup of pressure. The vision goggles are, because they become linked to one user or one person's brain or environment, as I understand it. I could actually read it to you, but there is some wording like that.
But there's a soul to the ceramic, yeah?
Perhaps, yes, he talked about not having anyone touch the cups you're using other than yourself.
But they also draw energy, so they do absorb your energy.
That's why, but the same as the pads. If they absorb your energy and you are giving it a negative energy, because you're healing yourself, you can contage somebody else.
That's right, John.
And I'm sure we'll get clarification once these small systems come out. But gee, it would be great to have one in your pocket, and if there was a man on the street that's not eating regularly, you could hand him this little system and say, here, now you'll be fed. Anyone else want to bring up any questions? It's midnight in, no, it's 11, I think, in Europe right now.
Mark, it all has to do with intention of when you're giving it.
Right, that is done, sir. I'm gonna say you a little story about that. It is my understanding, yeah, it is the intention. If I want something, exactly, I don't want something. I realized that I found out few times, if I really love something, but I don't want that, but I see its beauty, and I feel very appreciated inside and feel good. And after that, anyway, that thing come to me anyhow. I don't have to work for that. I don't have to ask for that. It just come. So and after that, few times I intentionally try that thing to bring to me, but it didn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. So I know if something you want to gravitate, you have to just love it and appreciate it and feel good about it. And if you need that, it will come to you. It is my understanding. So I think intention is the main thing. What is your need and what do you really want inside? Not just I want, I need, that way. That's it.
Thank you, Selena,
Thank you.
for sharing.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, jumping Jalal Bhai, you can.
Hello, everyone. I think we need to understand more this thing. You know, if you bring a box and you bring a nano-coated plate and non-nano-coated plate and you put a water and you put a salt, you will create the condition to attract what we call CO2. So just think what you have in your body. It is a magnet. So when you create a condition, you will get it. You want it, you don't want it, you love it, you don't love it, you do not need it, you need it. When you create a condition, you will get it. It's not necessary will be tangible, but it is there. It's not necessarily strong, but it is there. You need, if we go to the CO2 box, our problem is we are still until this moment of time, we need to see the CO2. We want to see the CO2. That means we done something right. But don't forget, this is a child play tool. It is a plasma, but it is the weakest plasma ever you create. The real plasma, which you do not see. You know it's there. You do not need to see. When you see it, that means it is, what we see in the front of us, antimatter and the dark matter. These two you do not see. You see only the matter state. And this is the weakest ever. So when Mr. Cash comes and tell you, think good, because you are creating every second you are creating due to what you think. So when you speak good and when you do good, 100% your thinking must be and will learn to be good, because you use the matter state by doing, you use the matter state by speaking to achieve the thinking, because you have no other alternative. Thinking is the higher from the three of them. It's the same thing with the box, the same thing with the macro, the same thing with any reactor you do. It's above the matter state. That means you do not see it. And really try to develop knowing it's there and finished, because I done what I have to do, so it's there. So I must take from there to what I want. And this is until now we didn't achieve. Although we are achieving, the problem we are achieving, but still we didn't work with it. So when you put nano-coated whatever, and you put another plate, whatever, you will create. So you love it or you don't love it, you create. So it's the same thing. You are always creating, always. Now you want to see what you are creating. Yes, it's very easy. Look from 1 to 14 days. What's happening in these days? This is what you are creating. Soul of physicality, soul of the emotion, soul of the man, whatever they interact together, they will create a condition. This condition, you will see it seconds to come. Not in the past. Nothing in the past. Finished. You are coming to the future. So whatever you see in the future, you are already create the condition for it. Look to this 14 days. Is it good? That means you done this reactor to see what you're gonna see. And there is a lot of it you do not see because it is not tangible. It is above the matter state. I hope I made something here. Thank you.
Jella,
Yes.
why 14 days?
I really I don't know. This is in the teaching from all these years, and you know, I think it is a cycle for it to be in the matter state in a way, to be weak enough.
In the matter state, it manifests in 14 days. You were talking about that?
From the first second until 14 days, if you want to see it in the matter state.
I think it happened. I did it within 12 hours.
I'm saying it from 1 second.
Yeah, it should be 1 second.
It can be from the first second to come.
Yes, it should be like that. Yeah.
It should be. This is different. It should be. If is it in the matter state, that means it is very weak.
Yeah.
And it's better not to see it, even in 14 years, because it's higher than the matter state, whatever. we need to think like this. Then you know, this will give you confidence. Start with the small things. Mr. Cass saying, start with the very small things that it do not harm, and in reality, you do not steal. You are learning a process, very small things, and see if these small things happen. And this is the way you progress in you know, developing what you are asking. You are always asking, and you are the problem. You always asking, and you receive, but you do not, you know, you do not stay in one place to receive it. We always ask. Every day we ask 10,000 times, and we change the address, we change the delivery, and we change the item and everything. We do not sit and wait for what we ask.
So, for example, when we pray, we pray for certain results, and then we don't. There's no. We obviously we're expecting some result, and it doesn't come in till years after. So does it mean that we are just solely focused on the weakest part of the results, which is the matter, the tangible part, that all along we've been receiving that, but we're too weak to observe it?
No, what's happening? If you pray, that means you ask for something, yes? Here, there is another condition. The universe is accommodation. It is not forcing. So your soul, the soul of the man, work with this accommodation. If you ask for something that it can be delivered to you without changing what the soul of the man wants, you will get it in the first second. If do not change what the soul of the man wanted to do. And this is the most important thing, the soul of the man. But you and me and all of us here, we do not really, we are learning to work with the soul of the man. Soul of the man, the main purpose of it, that it gives the physicality, the emotion, the soul of physicality. The purpose of existence is to take. So that's why we see a lot of, a lot of conflict between the two. Soul of the man connected to the universe, and the universe, we know the law of the universe. Give always, because whatever you give, you are more elevated, you are, more lighter. It is the opposite, exactly the opposite of the matter state. The matter state, how much you take, how much you make a matter state, how much you will be tangible, how much you will see what you do. But in the soul state, no, how much you do not see, which is going in the path of the soul of the man. A lot to speak about the soul of the man. What is the soul of the man? What is the orange? Is it in the water? We speak a lot about the orange and the books, but it's apparently a lot of us didn't understand it until now. When you create this feeding box and you get the essence of this orange in the water, do you remember? I said, if you are a little bit more professional, you can manifest the orange in the water. But in reality, is it the orange, the original, or the orange is above the box? The orange always above the box. So if the soul of the man is the orange, what is it? Is it the energy which is manifest itself due to the magnets, what you done? So this is your body. This is what you create. Comes out of interaction of emotion and physicality, which is egg and sperm, which create the condition to link to the higher. What is the link of the higher? It's the soul of the man. You link to it. So now you receive all the information from the soul of the man to create this, what you call matter state box. Absolutely, it's no different. But we need to understand it. Once you create this orange in that box as a matter state, this is the mitra, my friends. You will not see a mitra as as a human. It is understanding. Once you create this orange out of the fields, now Mitra is there. And I think Mr. Cash, he was waiting for this moment of time when one of the knowledge seekers which create this tangible matter state we call orange. Because finish is the same process. As we came from the ray of the universe to the sun, to the earth, and in the interaction between them, we create as a human, it's the same thing, the same process. So it's you, always you. And now in this moment of time, there is a reactors inside you, which is working as a magnet. Just think good. Just think to give. You call it to pray. You call it elevation. You call it sending a peace thoughts, sending love, sending care. Do you want to see it? Now it will not be in the same way it goes from you. It goes from the higher, from your soul. Why you want to see it in the matter state? It is very weak. Why you want to receive it in the matter state, really? Like, you know, I give gold and I change it for a copper. Why? Why it's not the opposite? I give from what I have too much. I have too much copper. I want to receive gold. It's very rare. I want to receive diamond. It's very rare. Why should I change the other one? Why I pray and I give love and I give care and change it for a word, change it for an act, matter state? No, it's opposite. Let me talk too much and I receive by praying. Let me do too much and I receive by praying. It is higher. And you will receive 100%. You will receive. And if you take as even in the teaching, in the private teaching, I tried a lot of times to open the eyes of the knowledge seekers to something. You know, if you take one, the work of the plasma, if the plasma take one, the plasma give 5. This is the behavior. So if you are working in the plasma, you are taking, let's say, 1 kilowatt. You have to give back 5. Not you as a human. No, your device, your plasma. Because you make it with all this plasma interaction, it will give back 5. So from where you are taking? You are taking from the grid, let's say. You take 1 kilowatt. Okay, let's be saying you are stealing 1 kilowatt. You have to give 5. It's not you have to. It is the way it's work. So your plasma will give back to the grid 5. Okay. I am not stealing. I take 1. I will be very generous. I will give 2. The 3 extra, which I generate, which I give back, I will take them. I already take 1. I give 2. So let the grid take extra 1. I have 3 free plasma. Understand, guys? You have 3 free plasma, which is already generated from your MAGRA. Take this three, everyone separately, and do the same thing. You take one from this three and give back 5. You take the second one and you give 5. You take the third one and you give 5. Now, how much you have? You have 15. Now do the same process. Separate the 15 times and give back 5. 15x 5. You have 75. You know, and this is all free. This is all free and you didn't steal from no one. You are already take only 1 kilowatt and you give back 2. So from this 3, you can create 1,000. It's the same thing with your body. It's the same thing with your thought. The teaching of Pustakash is there. You are taking one paragraph of his teaching. What you need to do? You already steal from him. Okay, make it as a stealing. I took one paragraph. What I do with it? Should I keep it or work with it and then teach it and then work with what I done to give more, to teach more? And you know the problem, you do not ask. In any topic of his teaching, every minute you can, there is a knowledge. Take this 1 minute of knowledge, learn it, understand it. Now what you done, you put effort, you put energy, so you are already give of what you are taking. Take it, develop it, think about it, how you come to it from another angle, how you teach it for the others to be like you the same way. Maybe they will add from their point of view more than you think. By doing wrong, by doing right, by asking, by answering. Alex teaching for how many now? 2, 3, 4 years. Take one paragraph from his teaching. And this is what we see in the Brazilian teaching and the Spanish group and even the German group. But we need more. You will be a teacher even for 1 minute. Why not? What to prevent you from giving? Nothing. Are you afraid of you are wrong? You are always wrong, and we are all wrong. So why you are afraid? And don't worry, we will say thank you for your teaching, because you will add something, and you add something, we add something, we take something, you take something, and this is how we progress. Because in the end, you will be a messenger. All of you here, today, tomorrow, in 100 years, in 1,000 years, you are already accepted as a knowledge seeker. You are already accepted as a peace messenger. Not necessary here. Not necessary. What we are doing from the CO2, it's not necessary to work with it here. Maybe with this, what we are doing CO2 here as a matter state, and it have a dimension of work in the matter state. But if you take it in another environment, it will be diamond. Change the environment, whatever you do, it will change to what the environment allow.
I saw myself different body. I know I am in different places too, but I don't know how I am doing those. But I saw myself under the sea.
So how many times you want to see it to believe?
I know, I believe that.
You
I'm
finished.
everywhere.
It's all finished.
Yeah, I believe that I'm everywhere.
So behave.
I do.
Mr. Cash saying you are the creator. Okay,
Yes.
go and learn what does the creator do. Well,
Just
there is a
create.
lot of knowledge outside how the creator is doing. All the religions telling you how the creator is doing. All these cults, they are teaching you what is the creator doing. So without anyone knowing, only you and yourself, and you go and you manifest. But you don't need a matter state anymore. You do not need any thanks. You don't need anything from anyone. It is elevating your soul, because you know your soul, it will manifest
Yeah.
itself tomorrow. Tomorrow, that could be in 10 years, it could be 1 second, it could be hundreds of thousands of years. So you know tomorrow it will manifest itself due to its strength. And this do not work with the matter state, my dears. Absolutely. It works with its level. What is its level? It's the free plasma. The free plasma, which is you do not see, you do not touch, you do not feel, you do not hear, you do not.
Yeah. And another thing, Dalbai, I think when if you tell any people, they don't want to listen right away. Some of them, maybe not. It is not their time. That's why they don't want to listen.
Why you want them to listen?
Yeah,
You know
I don't
why?
want.
You know why?
What?
You know why?
Mm.
Because you yourself, you do not believe in yourself. So you need someone to confirm that you are right. When you are right, you have two. When you are more right, you have 3, 4. When you are more right, you have 50 and 60 and 100 and 200. Then okay, if all of them they are going this way, so we are right. You know what?
Mm.
If you find like this, all of you are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do not need to confirm to anyone.
Yes, I don't need, but I'm telling this one, like when people's time happen, like this is my time to learn that. That time I will learn. But before, whatever you do, whatever we do to teach anybody, if they don't want to learn, they don't want to listen, they don't, because it is not that time. Yeah, I'm telling that one. But I know that's why I don't tell anybody to. When somebody
Tell
asks
them.
question,
No, tell them. But you know in which way?
in
your thoughts.
Yeah, I do that. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I do that.
And this is the highest. This is really the highest. Well, we have this, all of us, all the knowledge seekers try to approach everyone, every people with how we learn, you know. And this is good. This is good. This is not bad. But now with the teaching and learning from Mr. Cash, there is one in reality we do not use. We are not using. We learn it, we know it, all of us, but still we are not using it. And this is our thought. Try, you know, if you read any paragraph from Mr. Cash, try to read it and try to send it for anyone in front of you and see. Even sorry if I say see, you do not need to see, because you already done your teaching. You are already give and you are already received. Elevating this way of communication, that means you already given and you are already taken. So you do not need to be manifest. It's up to them. Accommodate their souls with the soul of physicality, with the emotion. They will do it in next to come. Like, you know, when I'm teaching here just now, a magraph, I will do all the magraph. I'm teaching here and there and here, but you know, what I will say, okay, can I see it tomorrow? This is also wrong. But because we are in learning process, that's why I always insist about seeing the things in the matter state to learning process. But in reality, it's up to you, all of you here, 40 or 60 of us here. When he have the time, when the soul accepted to make this magraph, he will do it in 1 second, in 1,000 seconds, in 10 million seconds. It make no difference. I already give what I know. I already received, because when you give, you receive more information, and it will open for me, because tomorrow someone will ask. After tomorrow, I will review what I know. So I will search, I will find. That means I received in the same way I give. So use the thought and thinking. And this is the process which UC members work with. Elevating by wishing all the good things for everyone. Who prevent you from doing that? Every second you can do. And you do not need, you know, one, Mr. Kat said, I need only one person, one soul, which achieve connection to the higher soul. It will change everything, because one cell in your body, when it changes, it will, with the time, it will change all the cells, because it's working with the higher. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jalal. All the while you were talking, you caused me to think greatly about the 5+1 peace negotiations, and I think that is on everybody's mind, front and center. Actually, there is an urgency with respect to that. So. Mark, do you think we can make a wish and have a
Thank you, Alex.
minute of silence for that? Yes, thank you so much, Jill.
Of course. Of course, we can ask our soul to do it all the time. And this is a test that no one fails. And it gives us practice about creating conditions through the fields, through the soul, without any matter state involved. So why don't we all take a minute, elevate the 5+1 and any other things that come into your mind. I think they can be included in that elevation. You can not only give to one, you can give to many at the same time.
you know what we need only? We need to write a 3 sentence in every corner where your eyes goes. Think good and do good and speak good.
Sure, I think that's beautiful shielding.
You write it everywhere that, it will be a process of every time you see it, every time you see it, every time you see it, then it will be a nature behavior. In the car, in the office, in the work, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the waiting room, wherever. Just write it. You remember when we speak about tapping the foot? This process we didn't use to that. So what Mr. Kash say? Just write it everywhere. You tap your heel. That you remember every time. Every time you see it, oh, okay, I remember. Tap my heel. Tap my heel. It will give you more immune. It's the same thing. Write also this and small notice everywhere, even in your watch. If you have a watch and you see all the time, just write it there. Okay, think good and speak good and good, because it's a learning process. And every time you read it, it will automatically it will elevate your soul, because it is a connection to the soul. And this is the connection when you remember it and when you speak about it. Thank you, Mark.
You, Jalal. Shall we take a couple minutes? Let's let the clock change on the computer here, and then we'll take 2 minutes to practice our elevation. And this is what we are doing. We are practicing. But it's great to know from Mr. Kesh that nobody fails this test. And we can all add different fields and different strengths, and maybe your field is the one that's needed the most. But yes, we need to think good, speak good, and do good until it becomes second nature, or first nature, what they call second nature. So I'll just let the clock change to 46. It's on 45 right now. And then there it goes. Okay, so let's take 2 minutes and just elevate the 5 plus 1 plus the others, and this is very key. Thank you all. Okay, thank you for participating in this greatest movement of the soul in the man. as Mr. Kesh says, it's the collective awareness by giving will create a position of change, no other thing. And we hear that many times in the bumpers and so on. So as we get more and more people to give from their souls, not money, not material things, but give through your soul, the collective awareness will create this position of change.
I just want to say, Mark, I wish peace on earth, peace all around the world. Peace all around.
No question, my soul is always present.
Thank you so much, everyone, for allowing me to present. And thank you for all your contributions. And we'll look forward to the next exciting episode.